Well, welcome back to a Victorious Friday. I'm so excited about today's guest. I have two wonderful individuals who's going to bring some real strong conversation to us today. They've been married for 22 years, two amazing children. I mean, I tell you, the professions are exactly what I need. One's going to get you in shape, and one's going to make you look good in the house when you do get in shape, because the house is going to look amazing. I'm going to talk to you today and bring in my guests, Sandra and David Weber. They're in the Carolina, and they're becoming good friends. Sandra is a wellness mentor. She's been empowering her clients to rebuild their mind and their body and connection and all of that. And I tell you, I need that. My mind and my body, I just lost 15 pounds, so I'm feeling good. And Sandra, she's been doing this for many years for so many individuals and making them feel great. And as you know, when you have a healthy mind and healthy body, man, you can't do better than that. And so just to tell them a little bit of, she's been doing this for over a decade. She's had hands-on clinical body work and handiwork, and she's experienced, and she owns her own company and called Integrative Body Work in Charlotte. I need to come check that out. And when she's not working with clients, I mean, she's in the treatment room. I mean, if you'll see her, and you'll see how fit she is, and she makes us all look bad. At least she's making me look bad. But David, I don't know, you got to tell me how you keep up. She hosts all types of things. She has podcasts and on and on and on. If I keep reading her Bible, her bio, it'll be 2 hours, 3 hours. And so let me bring in and give David his equal time, because David is just as worthy. He owns and operates his own business as well. It's Regal Painting Company. So if you need some painting out there, David's your man. And he's a third generation painter. He's been spectacular, is what I understand, on the residential side. He's one of the best. So I need to check out some of his work, David. We may need to talk a little bit. I don't know if you do anything in Atlanta, but at least I can refer you to some friends in the Carolinas. And so Sandra and David, they've been married for 22 years, and they have a beautiful daughter in Taylor and a son in Travis. And they have, they've done this thing around parenting. If they're anything like me, they know parenting is a challenge, but yet it's a great gift and a great honor and privilege. Welcome to the show, Victorious Friday, Sandra and David.
Thank you.
How are you guys doing today?
We're doing wonderful. We're very thankful to be here.
Very good. Thank you for having us.
Thank you for coming on. We're going to have some fun in this maybe 30 minutes. We're going to be together. And I like to just get started. I shared a little bit about you. I'm sure I haven't shared all the good stuff, but just tell me a little bit about you and tell me what brought you to Carolina.
Well, I'm a native. I was born here.
Mm-hmm.
I was, typical Southern country girl. And, over the course of time, I ended up in Tennessee in college. That's how we met. I always joke that he had to come down south to find a good woman.
There you go.
So an athlete, played volleyball, and we have a lot of that stuff in common, played basketball. So had a lot of common goals right at the beginning, and just enjoy an athletic family, and being active is a huge part of our mental health, that we commit to. So just, the goal of having an active, healthy, happy home was our goal from the beginning. So we're very, very thankful that
Fantastic.
We have that.
Yeah. And
Where from? Yeah.
Yeah. So we, I had this business when we came here from Knoxville 13 years ago, and we had just bought our forever home. We thought we would stay there. A year later, we took a trip here and went to a church of a friend of ours from college. He was about a year in, and we were driving home, and we both said, we kind of were talking. I said, maybe we should pray about moving to Charlotte and help out with this, in the church. And I don't mean come in and do a bunch of work, but be an encouragement to the pastor who was our friend and get involved. So we talked about it, and about 2 weeks later, we put our house on the market in Tennessee, and had to come back down here within a week or two. It sold fast and get a house, and it all happened very fast. That's how we got to Charlotte. The Lord moved us here to be involved in a startup, and we've been glad for it. We've always been a part of large ministries, and it was a real encouraging and refreshing time for us to come here and let our children also see what God can do with a few people who will put him first and love him. So,
well, that's fantastic. 22 years. Talk to me a little bit about what is parenting to you, and what's been your experience as parents? Two beautiful kids.
Well, I never thought I'd get married as young as I did. I was 21 when we got married, and I had a childhood that taught me what to look out for, negatively speaking. So I just assumed I would get done with college, get out, live my own for a while, because I knew the type of person that I wanted to be with. But thankfully, God just brought me the right one early, the first time. So, always intended to have a family if we were able. And I did actually have some problems. We weren't supposed to be able to have our second child. I had some health issues. So, going through those situations together definitely build our relationship to a deeper level, and being able to have that second child, having a boy and a girl, was pretty awesome. And we were like, we're done. Yay. So you just going
That's
into
a matching pair,
Yeah. Going into parenting, it's just, I heard recently a psychologist talking about, if your parents messed you up this much and you only mess your kids up this much, you're doing good. So just learning from the mistakes that I saw growing up, trying to make sure that we didn't repeat those, and then actually came across and did a little bit better. And just having my children feel safe and happy, and having a relationship where we actually like coming home to each other. And I think, I talk about this all the time. When we got together and decided to get married, I have 2 rules. Number 1, you never yell at me, because I couldn't handle that. I knew I couldn't. And number 2, if it comes in your head, it comes out your mouth. And that's kind of how we dealt with our kids too. We have to talk about everything. Yeah. So we've made that kind of a priority, and that's how it's been.
Yeah, and that's not always hard in a marriage. There's sometimes some things you don't want to talk about, and it's hard. But as we navigated that way, obviously now, and we're looking back, and Lord willing, a long time forward, that was a good 2 things we started with. My parenting wasn't so deliberate as far as what am I going to do as a parent. I grew up in a Christian home. I had a godly heritage. My grandfather became a Christian, and he brought his family up in the Lord. My father did the same. My dad is a peaceful man. That's the best way to say it. I've never heard him raise his voice to my mother. I've never heard him disrespect her, and other women as well. But my mother, and I had a godly example in him. And maybe it's not the best thing, but a lot of the things I do is because of the example that he set, and I copy some of the things. And now I hear him say, boy, I messed up on so many things, and I'm thinking, which ones are those? So, but yeah, I was trained in a Christian home, doctrine and biblical principles, and had a father who not just said it, but he really did live it. He didn't just say it. He spoke with his actions.
And that's how I knew I was going to marry him at 21, by seeing all that.
I was going to say, Sandra, I know there's a lot here said, unsaid, but I can kind of imagine as I'm hearing the 2 stories, I'm hearing your story, I'm hearing David's story, that why you were attracted to this guy and his life, and in the way that he was bringing certain values to the table, and vice versa, right? I think we can learn in any circumstance. And as you say, we always want that better life for our children, right? For the next generation. We want to see them thrive. We want to see them go on and have great, healthy marriages and thriving relationships, and be able to reinvest that back into their children. And that's what I'm hearing is happening in your home. Mm-hmm. Yeah. What type of challenges are you faced kind of in this postmodern society? I mean, we've got, access to things that we didn't have. Our kids today have access to all types of media. They have access to this little thing called the cell phone and smartphones and all this. And, we had to beg to get that 1 or 2 encyclopedia, maybe we'll sneak on 3 shows, ABC, NBC, CBS, and hey, we'll sneak a programming in it, but the television went off at 12 o'clock. You heard a little beeping sound, at least in my age. You guys are a little younger than me, but these kids are growing up differently today. What challenges would you say you're facing as parents today?
Well, our kids are now 16 and 19. So one is a freshman in college. So we've already been through some of the challenges. And what they were initially, especially having a daughter, is the sexualization of society. So, we, in discussing how we were going to bring up the kids when they were younger, was, we're not going to have certain movies or TV shows available to you. We're not going to have certain music to you. But at the same time, being very open about dialogue about what it was and what it is, and it's not a bad thing when it's in the right time. And that's what a lot of Christians don't have is it's just all a no, but not why. And with sexuality, especially, when is it okay? And it's not a bad thing. It's just wrong timing. So with us, it was just, let's put some parameters and boundaries on what is allowed in at a certain age and just follow those guidelines. And we gave them phones later than most parents give them phones. So we tried to, curtail some of those things that become a problem. And with our kids being athletes and us encouraging them in that genre, that helps a lot, keeping them active. But I think that would be one of the biggest things for me.
Yeah. And I think, Taylor, we didn't let her have certain social media. We never monitored it strongly, but we kept an eye on it, and we wouldn't let her have certain things. And she would always come to us and she would say, Dad, I'm the only one that doesn't have Snapchat. I'm the only one that doesn't, whatever the other ones are, Kick, or I don't know what but she's like, all my friends have it and I can't communicate. Of course, she hated hearing me say, you have messages, right? You can text them. So, she never had a bad attitude about it. She wanted to do it, but she never, as far as we know, snuck and had a secret account or anything. And then my son, I will never forget, he got his first smartphone because he had to fly by himself. And I had to get him a phone that was, I felt safe. He was 13 or 14. It was just a couple years ago. And I remember after I got his phone one day, I had him in our office just talking to him. I said, I want to see your phone. And I was worried, but I started going through it. And it's like, he had gospel music, some secular music, but nothing wrong, so it was encouraging to see that. Yeah. Although we still do have to set parameters, put those in place, it was, they've done really well with the social media and the smartphones and all that. So.
Well, you must be doing something right, and they're responding to it. I always say, we started, and I was kind of one of those that we won't get a cell phone till about 16 years old, and your Dad, come on, that's I gotta keep up with my friends. I say, hey, don't worry about it. If you need to be picked up from the movies, hey, I'll pick you up. Don't worry about it. So I was old school, right? So I realized that at some point. There came a point, my kids have just been a blessing. I just had to trust them to some degree, right? I have to really feel I put values in place, boundaries in place. We modeled as best we could. I'm sure we made a lot of mistakes. At the end of the day, our kids are watching every moment, what we do, not just what we say, and they see that lived out. And we were just so blessed that they would follow that, and that would become their own values, not just ours, right? And so, one of the things we talk about at Victoria's Family is, do you have a real intentional vision, a destiny that you like to see for your kids? And I just want to give you a moment to think about it. Maybe you didn't have it in writing, maybe you didn't think about it like that as much, but was there a destiny, was there a vision kind of that you had for your family, for your children, growing up that you like to share with us?
I did. Coming from my situation in my home, I wanted to instill in my children confidence in who they are and the ability for them to be in the world and communicate to people with grace and kindness, God's love, in a way that people will listen. So I don't care what job they have. I don't care their financial status. My goal for them obviously was for them to accept Christ and to have a happy home and family. And that every person that they walk by in the grocery store or that they work beside at their job feels radiating off of them compassion and love. And that to me, you know, as long as they get happily, they find a mate that's a good person, that has the same, you know, biblical worldview, that will be my intent for them, is to be able to walk in this world and bless every person that they have a chance to rub shoulders with.
Yeah. And as we, especially when they're younger, I mean, obviously your first 7 years of their life is very crucial in imprinting things on their mind. But I'll never forget, I think Taylor was probably 7, 8, 9. And we were in the store. I don't know if we had an interaction with a lady or something happened. We had talked and we got in the car and she's like, Dad, I think she was a Christian. And I thought to myself at that time, I was like, I want my kids to be what that lady embodied. That lady, we didn't even talk about Christ or anything, biblical or anything like that. It was just a normal interaction. And my daughter was able to see in her life that she was a Christian in the way she talked and carried herself and treated people. And, that was kind of like a point at which all the things that we're working towards, it's like, that's what I want out of my children. I want them to show the love of Christ, even if they don't say, hey, I'm a Christian. Just the way that you live your life and the way that you act, your life shows that you have Christ and that you're following him.
You have these ages where, teenagers, right? And one is going off to college, but, I always say there's this phase of life where when they're young, they're yours, right? They think you guys are amazing. They think you're geniuses. You're the smartest people in the world. And then by the time they get to around 12, 13, 14 years old, you start to lose a little bit of that. And by the time they're 15, 16, 17, you guys know nothing, right? So you go from knowing everything to knowing nothing. Then they go off to school and they try to, get that independence but kind of lose a little contact. But then the good news is, guys, when you come back around 30 or so, maybe 28, 30, depends on maturity, you guys actually start to know something again. And so you might be in that period right now that you know very little. So from their perspective. Do you see that in your world as I'm seeing it, as I talk to people? Is that kind of a flow, or that's just some thinking that's not accurate?
I think because we've both been involved in athletics and we've both coached, we have known how that works for a long time. So again, going back to intention, we intentionally put our children under the influence of other people that have our same philosophy, like coaches, like their youth director, different people like that if they have those feelings about us and they, maybe aren't communicating with us like we'd like at the moment, they still have that influence with someone else. And with what I do for a living, even though I know so much about the anatomy, when my daughter was hurt, she hurt her back and lost her senior year of volleyball. It was devastating. Like, she knows that I know a lot, but I'm still also just mom. So even in that situation, I took her to specialists and people that taught me what I know for them to work on her and treat her and let me just be mom. So even though that situation is true, you can still intentionally work around it to have them being influenced by people that are shoring up what you're trying to do. So we didn't experience it a lot, and our kids haven't, disassociated too much. But I also think it's because we have a very communicative style of family. So we're always talking in the car about stuff. And just, it's a very open conversation.
Except our son, he's the quiet one.
He's quiet, yeah. He communicates in a different way, and he's very perceptive.
So I think Taylor, if you were going to say she's going through a time to kind of gain her independence, I think usually kids probably do when they go to college. I mean, you've experienced it. You have children that have been through school like that. Not a rebellious stage by any means, but at a stage where I think she's learning some things on her own, and which I think that will benefit her, to learn those life lessons. I mean, I had to do it. We all had to do it. And then my son, he kind of went through a phase. I think it was after he went through puberty and he was becoming a young man, kind of like not kind of a withdrawal from Sandra. And I think that, you know, from what we can have read and try to understand is him becoming a young man and gain that independence as a man. And so, you know, we have had little things like that go on, but I don't think any of them have been in a rebellious stage. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally understand. That's good. You know, we obviously are living in a different day than 10, 20 years ago. You guys have seemed like a pretty good parenting run in terms of kids being relatively obedient. But if you're like any parent, right, you have challenges. And I'm sure parenting has changed quite a bit as we look at the last 10, 20, probably even 5 years. What challenges do you think this generation is facing versus what we faced growing up? What would you say as parent? What are you seeing out there?
I always say this when in other conversations we have in relation to being a Christian. You know, sometimes people say, "Oh, it's getting harder, it's getting tougher," and I said, "Well, you know, there were Christians during Nero's time. You know, there were Christians in places where you couldn't be a Christian. No matter what, God's always God, and He's always constant, and we still have to follow the principles that He's put forward. And no matter what happens, we continue to follow that. Now, of course, circumstances change because times change, but as far as parenting, opinion is that we follow Christ and follow God and His Word, and you know, if we keep an open heart and an open mind and allow Him to speak to us through people, through maybe a sermon or something like that, we're directed in parenting. So I think the principles always stay the same. It's just the things that surround us are a little bit, I would say, different. So I try not to ever get discouraged. I usually don't get discouraged when I think of the times we live in, because you know, there's through generations, there's been highs and lows. So, you know, obviously the challenges are different, but I don't know if I'm making sense, but
yeah.
I'm trying to, yeah.
I think to say like two specific things, especially being in the industry that I'm in, I think the accessibility to drugs, pharmaceutical prescriptive drugs, is a huge problem because it's so rampant amongst the parents. And studies are showing that even though the parents are there and they're present, they're not really present emotionally and mentally for the children. So it's almost like they're still being neglected.
Yeah.
So I think that's a huge problem that kids have to deal with. And because they're so easily and readily given to children because they're misbehaving, and that's going to open up a can of worms with the educational system and all that. But I think the accessibility for drugs and the accessibility for pornography, things like that, are really hard these days. And that's why I think with having the fundamental open dialogue and constantly talking to your children about these hard topics early on, and not just saying no to everything and keeping everything outside the box of your safety sphere, is super important. Because if you do have an open dialogue about it, it's not new to them or exciting to them, or like, I want to be, when I go through those teenage years and I want to be, you know, defiant and bad, I'm going to do those things because they're already parts of the conversation. And I teach the kids, you know, put this in your file box, you know, your file cabinet, when we talk about stuff, and show them people or show them examples, or just, you know. So I think that would be two of the biggest, hardest things, is the accessibility to drugs and the accessibility to, you know, media and stuff like that.
You know, one of the things we talk about on this show are the values, family values. And I'm hearing a few values come out of your statements. One, communication is so important in your home. It's really relationship building. And so you know, most parents, it's difficult to have that conversation. Some of them don't open a door to have those conversations, to build relationships and build trust. It sounds like those things are important in your home. What are some of the values, and I don't want to add values and say what they are for you, but that's just what I'm hearing. What are the values would you say you have that you've been trying to establish in your home Communication, for example, may be one of those. Any others that are important to you?
I think one, and the one that we're constantly learning too, like he was talking about how our son has a different personality, is learning to look at someone that you love and care for and see how they want to be communicated with. Like what makes them feel heard and seen, and not being so selfish to want everything to be in your favor. So I guess compassion and selflessness is how you're going to better navigate relationships, because everything we do is about relationships. So aside from like the obvious ones like honesty and things like that, is true compassion and empathy for someone that you're in a close proximity to.
Yeah, and I think like on a day-to-day life level basis, church has been important for us. We attend church. Our kids are involved in sports, and if anyone's had children involved in sports, Sundays a lot of times are sporting days. And some may not like what, the decision or the way we went. We allowed them, but like for instance, when they put our son's practices on Sundays at noon, we were going to have to miss church, and we didn't want to do that. So there's another church near us that we started going to because they had an early service. So we were able to attend church and the study groups, and then able to go to volleyball and take care of, make sure that we're still in church and show them that it is still important no matter what. And then we did do some traveling on Sundays for tournaments and things. If we could, we would go to church if they didn't have games in the mornings. A lot of times though, these tournaments have FCA will be there, and they'll have a little room set up where the kids can go do have a little devotional and things like that. So just always wanted to make sure that no matter what we're doing, that God is part of our lives, or is the main focus in our lives. So
we think that's critical, and I know in today's world that may not be popular, but I'm not trying to be popular as a parent. I'm trying to raise my kids in the Lord, and I think for me, I bought in like lock, stock, and barrel. I think that's what it is for me. Ephesians 6:4 talks about fathers really speaking to parents. It says, don't exasperate your children, don't frustrate them, but yet train and instruct them in the Lord. And that's really the priority that I'm hearing from you as well. We could have certainly participated in sports events. I was a big baseball player when I was growing up, and we played a lot of sports. But back then, they didn't allow sporting events to take place on Sunday in particular. In fact, many of the stores were closed until after church, and church wasn't, maybe we'll go. It was like, you're going to church. It's just a matter of, how many days a week? Is it 6 days or 7? We kind of grew up on that. Today, I'm not sure if you're aware, but less than 10% of Christians read their Bible today. Less than 5% of Christian families actually come home from church and have a dialogue as to what they heard. And now in most churches, we split parents and we split the children into different gatherings. And as a result, we're not even sure what the messages were in either of those gatherings. When we were growing up, we at least would have a conversation around what the pastor had shared and around the table. But today we're having very little and very few table conversations in our homes today. The other stat that just blows me away is less than 5% of Christians' families pray together. So when you think about the disciplines of faith, prayer, God's word, worship, it seems to me that as Christians, we're missing it in so many ways. But yet we want to see healthy, thriving families and children growing up with this mindset that there's a sovereign God, that there's something greater than just worldly, but yet we've faced all these worldly winds, I'll call them, these barrages that's trying to pull our children, or attract our children in this way, whether it be media, whether it be culture, whether it be, where we're going to find this if we're not strengthening our home. I believe we've abdicated, as I did, to the church and outside organizations, maybe even FCA and so many. There's nothing wrong with that. but I believe we need to bring it back home-centered, and church and other organizations support it. And believe me, I'm an elder in the church. I'm really, most people say the church. No, there's significance in church. There's significance in membership. I'm not buying into well, we don't need to go to church. We do. It's important. It serves a purpose. But I'm finding that even Christians are not practicing the basic disciplines that builds the family into a strong home. Well, any thoughts around that? Any thoughts around those comments?
Yeah, and I think as a father, probably one of my biggest failures, is depending on other people to teach my children doctrine and truths and, you start out young, we're going to put the children in Sunday school. They're going to go, and we just depend on someone else to do it for us. And you are right about the conversations at the table. And even that alone, lives are busy. We both are self-employed. We schedule Monday evening. We sit down and have dinner together and make sure we're together every Monday. And then there are other times throughout the week we do, but for sure Monday is our night that we're going to sit down and have dinner. Of course, Sunday we'll have lunch together, but those times where we can actually spend time, and there's many other times, but fortunately for me, like my daughter works with me now. We have a lot of conversations while we're working.
Yeah.
For me, when I'm alone working, I've found that that's, I lonely, not in a bad way, but I don't have much to do. I'm painting, and when you paint, you think about things and you talk to God, and you spend a lot of time doing that. So, fortunately for me as a father, I've had opportunities to be with my children while I'm working. So I'm teaching them a good work ethic, and I'm talking to them about spiritual things. So it's, I've been fortunate in that.
Awesome.
I think what you're saying I correlate everything back to the body because that's just my industry. But people say they want to be healthy, they say they want to be strong, or the flip side, they're just constantly sick and constantly have this issue, that issue. And no matter what I tell them, how I can help them, they still go on the same thing because they don't put the time in. They don't put the work in. If you want to be healthy and strong, you have to intentionally put it on your calendar to do the fitness, to get the groceries bought. And it's hard work. And the same thing with your Christian walk is like, he said, people don't believe me unless they live right beside us and they're our neighbors and they see our cars. We're never at home. If we're not working late, we're at a volleyball tournament or at the gym. And we're super busy. And that's why we put it's on our phones, on our calendar, on our Google Calendar with a reminder. Monday nights are non-negotiables. And that's another, I think, maybe tool I want my kids to learn is anything can be accomplished. You just have to negotiate it well, even with yourself. So, fulfilling the Christian walk, maybe you have to put it on your calendar. I tell people, like, 2 of my workouts a week are on my phone as an appointment. They don't say what it is, but when someone says, hey, can you take me in for a session, or if someone asks me to do something, whatever, I can say, I'm sorry, I have an appointment. Because I'll give up some other times during the week, but there's 2 times I'm for sure, I know that's what's going to happen without question. And so even with the Christian walk, we may have to get to the point, because it is a fact we are just that busy. You have to intentionally put these things into place or they're not going to get done.
Yeah, I'm loving it right now because I'm hearing intentionality. I'm hearing communication. I'm hearing, let's schedule the time. Let's be, and one of the things for sure, we want to do the right thing, but sometimes we just don't know how, or we just don't prioritize it, do we? And then our kids.
The things that I wish I would, I don't. The things that I don't, I do.
It's
so true.
I mean, we have the best of intentions, right?
Yeah.
And you see it all too well in your industries. We want to paint that house, but we just don't want to save the money to pay for it. We want to get healthy, right?
And here's another thing, and this is, I think, why you started your podcast, why I started my podcast, a life physical example with his industry. He gets a lot of his jobs because people start their two-story foyer thinking they can paint it, but then, but I don't want to climb that ladder. So then they have to call in help. They don't have a plan. They don't have help. So it's always good to ask for help and reaching out to people like you, people that are in the mix that are learning tools and learning mechanisms and methodologies and ways you can implement things. Don't just keep going for 3 months, 6 months, a year with no help. If you need help with something, reach out to someone that you know that's doing a good job at it and be like, how are you doing it? Can you help me out a little bit? So it's not that God knows that we can't do it by ourselves, you know. The verse that talks about there's wisdom in a multitude of counselors. Reach out to people. If you're having trouble with your kids, if you're having trouble in your marriage, if you're having trouble individually, these things can't be accomplished by yourself. We're not islands.
And on that, you know, let's talk about the body. There's preventive maintenance as well. Not waiting till you get sick, but continuing to be healthy so that you can live a healthy lifestyle. In our Christian lives, we tend to wait till something bad happens and then we turn to God, or then we look for help. And I'm preaching to the choir when I say this, but we've talked about marital counseling for preventive. We need to go and we need to have someone help us and guide us into certain things. And even if there's no issues that we know of, godly counsel is good, and if we make it intentional, and we can prevent a lot of bad things from happening. And I think even in our spiritual lives, in our Christian lives, and let's talk about a family, we're not being preventive in some things. Just the little things. And you talked about not provoking your children to anger. Sometimes we think, oh, well, that's like, you know, teasing them or verbally. No, that can be in the way I live my life. Just walk my daily walk. Yeah. If my children don't see consistency, I could be provoking them to anger in that way. So while I fail often, my goal and what I try to do is to live a life knowing that they're watching me. And, you know, when you know someone's sitting there, and by the way, kids know way more than we think they know. And especially if you're going to be transparent and talk about things, you got to be ready for some difficult conversations.
Absolutely.
I think it goes back to that preventive maintenance in our spiritual walk. So.
Well, I love those two analogies. You know, we could have done a show around those two things right there. You know, a couple of things come to mind. They always say, you know, just like in business, it rises and falls from the top. And here it rises and falls from parents, like you, husbands and wife and spouses and so forth. And the other thing I heard in that, which is, man, I resonate so much with, I think you guys have figured it out, is let's do some preventive maintenance in this. Because look, this thing is long, it's hard, it's messy, right? You're never going to get it perfect. You're never even going to get close to perfect.
Right.
Don't even try. And I'm going to end with this last question, and I'll set it up this way. You know, everybody's asking me, well, what's the one tip? What's the one thing I can do? What's to be a great parent? I said, I don't know. You know, there's about 50 things I could give you, but there's one that I've seen them have landed on that works across all ethnic groups, all families, all situations. And that is, as parents, you are to love well. If you fail at anything else, if you give a foundation of love, I'm talking authentic agape love, not necessarily eros and phileo love, but real agape love, a love that's beyond your spirit, a love that's beyond you. You love your children well. I think that is the greatest tip I can tell a parent, because they're going to stray. We're going to mess up, you know, but if they know that they're loved, it's a foundation that cannot be shaken. No wonder that's the one commandment Jesus ended with. But that's just my thought. I want to hear from you. I mean, if you could give parents, just in addition to that love well, or if you don't agree with the love well, just say that as well. But what would you say? What would you say as a takeaway for every parent out there as they're trying to be intentional? They're trying to raise kids in this postmodern society. They're challenged with all the winds and the barrages of issues that you've stated already. What would you say to parents? What would you say to moms? What would you say to dads?
Going to what you said, love well. I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, I said, how do I love well? So I have two children, two different things, two different personalities, two different, there might be some similarities, but so how do I love well? And one of the things that pops into my mind is I love well by understanding both my weaknesses and my child's weaknesses, and make sure that I love them, or I say love, and we're talking about the love of Christ, God's love, and showing them that, because we can get heavy-handed sometimes. We can have a rule, and that we're not going to move from that rule. But when we love, sometimes, not that we're going to break the rules, but we have to understand that Christ loved us. If we're going to love as Christ loved, well, he forgave us. And am I going to forgive as Christ forgave me? And we've had a couple instances with our daughter, and brokenhearted, and there's discipline involved, yes, but how am I going to love her through that? And when my son has things he's dealing with, how am I going to love him through that? He responds differently than our daughter does. So that's for every parent it's difficult. You have to figure out what that is. But that's when I hear you say that my first thing is like, well, how do I do that? How do I do that for Travis? And how do I do that for Taylor? And how do I do that for my wife? How do I love her well and do this together? So I'm not here to tell people what that is. So.
I completely agree with that number one piece of advice. All psychological issues that stem from families and children come from the child or the individual not being seen and not being heard. It really is that simple. So again, going back to negotiation, is you've got to figure out how to communicate with that soul, because that soul is different than that soul. And it takes the same thing. It takes time. It takes investment. Figure out what it is. Like when our son was going through those few years of, kind of moving away from me, I would every once in a while just go tickle him for no reason, to have some type of physical bond and emotional bond. So just constantly figuring out ways on the different stages of their development to let them know they are seen and they are heard, which is going to translate into feeling loved. And on the marriage level as well. I mean, 22 years in, we're different people than what we were when we started. Yeah. I want different things now. He's different now. I can't just love him the same way I did when we first got married. So it's a constant adaptation. And if you're not constantly learning your child and learning who they are, dependent upon each situation they go through, then that's kind of your fault, because you need to be there and present and aware of what they're dealing with. So I think that expression of love is done by letting them know they are seen, letting them know they are heard, which means we have to stop talking a lot.
And and I'll end on this as an example is our son. I come from a family, I'm laid back. I come from a military, my grandfather was military and very stern. My dad was strict.
Think old school basketball coach.
Yeah. So I have a tendency that comes out sometimes in dealing, and my son will shut down when I do that. Because I'll talk and I won't let him finish, and I'll talk again. While I'm doing that out of love, I'm not loving well. And fortunately, when Sandra's in the room, she'll give me that look, and I know that, okay, I just need to be quiet, because he will shut down. Yeah. He won't say anything. But if you ask a question and you stop and you let him talk, it'll be fine. So learn that, that's an illustration right there of what it means, what I've learned.
Absolutely. Sandra, let me see that look that you give him. No, Dave, watch out. That look is famous. I think it's universal at this point. Well, in closing, I love to give you guys the last word. There's something, I wish we could just go on and on and on, but you can't. You guys are busy people. And is there a departing word? Is there something that you just love to leave us with and bless our audience with?
I'll start by saying this. When you sit here and you try to talk about the successes in parenting you have, you sit here and you really, it hurts your heart to know the things you've done wrong. And while I don't want to dwell on that, we have to be real and know that we need help, obviously from God, maybe mentors in our lives. But that's the biggest takeaway I took from this. Man, if you have the things like parenting, I'm sitting here thinking, wow, whoa, I'm really off. And I hope that just, if somebody can hear some of these things, that, we never have it figured out. And if we think we have it figured out, we're in for a long haul. And just let Christ lead you. And you say, well, that's such a vague, trite thing to say. No, have a relationship with Christ, and daily talk to him, and let him lead you, let him impress your heart, and give you desires in your heart to do certain things, and lead you in dealing with your children. And also, obviously the most important thing is your spouse, because you're parenting together. So
I like it.
I would like to leave everyone with the same with the body and the health. Health people come to me and they think they have to do these drastic changes to make, lasting effects and feel better. And it's always the same thing. It's the smallest amount of change will reap the greatest rewards if done consistently. So no matter where your family is right now, no matter what your history was in the family you grew up in, you can be the catalyst that changes how your whole family dynamic is playing out. So no matter what has happened before, we know the study of epigenetics means we have control over the gene. Whatever happened in the past, whatever programming you had, whatever situations and experiences you had, because of little tiny things like putting in Monday dinner on your calendar, little tiny things, you can completely change the future of your family. So no matter how hard things are right now or where you are, do something small this week. Pick one thing that you heard today and implement it, because when you do that, you'll be creating new habits that will create more positive change and more ability for the Holy Spirit to talk to you, and then change to happen in your family. So change can happen. Just do one little thing, and it's worth it. Because, as a child, I begged God to not let me get married if the person that I would be with was going to be anything like my father. I said, no matter how in love I think I am, do something to curtail that relationship, because I don't want to repeat what I had. So, and I prayed that prayer a lot as a teenager, and being able to be sensitive to the Holy Spirit, and then implementing all these things we're talking about, even though we're completely imperfect, and our kids can tell you that and list reasons why, we still have a very, I told someone this the other day, every time I come home and I see his truck in the cul-de-sac, I'm like, oh, good, he's home. And that's what I craved that so bad as a child.
That's good. Yeah.
And to be able to have that feeling as a 43-year-old, 22 years into marriage, and that's the example my kids get to see, I think we kind of won. Even though we're imperfect and our kids are going to do things, because every kid does, like you said, that foundation's set, and that's not going anywhere. So I think, just do the little things and do them really well.
Well, parents, you've heard it from just two wonderful. Sandra and David, you guys are amazing. And I know that doesn't mean you're perfect. It just means you're amazing. And so we're so thankful that you had taken a moment from your busy schedule to come and join us and be a part of the podcast. And we'll be sharing this with parents. And I'm sure what they're going to take away from this is very valuable. Well, I want to close. I want to, you guys be all professional. You would never do it. But I want to tell them about, very quickly, how would they contact you? How would they get, connected with what you do? And just give us a website, or, how do they reach out? How do they kind of learn about you and what you do and how you do it? I know you're doing all types of podcasts and services as well. Just give a quick shout out to yourself. This is your 2-minute infomercial. Just shout it out.
So on the clinical level, I do hands-on body work, craniosacral therapy, all kinds of different versions of body work to help the physical body reconnect with the brain, and then coaching to help people learn how to do that. So ri3consulting.com is my website.
Okay.
And then on the socials, Instagram is at the Sandra Weber. So that's me.
Okay. Fantastic. Well, friends and family of Victorious Friday, we want you to know that there's never a time in a child's life that they don't crave the love of the parent. They particularly crave the love of the dad. And what you've heard on this show is how important love is. And you've seen the model of that. We're not saying it's a perfect model. We're saying that it starts with one another. First, it really starts with ourselves. We got to love ourselves. And then it starts with one another, and then our children. And they become a priority in our life. That's non-negotiable. One of the things we're living for is a life that's well said. And one person said to me, if you can end this life with one achievement, and that achievement would be that the people that you love loves you, you've achieved quite a lot. And so that's my goal, is that my kids will grow up, the ones that I love, loving me, that my spouse would love me at the end of the day. If I've accomplished nothing else, that is an accomplishment I love to have. So I thank you, my good friends now. I can call you my good friends. And from Carolina, I can say, hey, I hope that we get a chance to meet each other face to face one day. And I know I can get some treatments that's going to make me feel better. And I know that I can contract and maybe one day get my house painted or something. I don't know, but we'll figure it out. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for being a part of the show. I hope that you enjoyed it, and maybe we'll do it again and have some fun next time. And Victorious Friday, we'll tune in. We'll come with another broadcast, another podcast that bring the type of wisdom that only the Lord can generate in and through us. So we thank you and have a blessed day.
Thank you.
Thank you.